What I'd like to do to start things off here is, as you heard in the introduction there, I had something of an adventurous summer. So we're going to start off with a couple of pictures here. This is my son Tim and myself, as you see there, standing or sitting at the steps of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. The picture to the other side is the same two people 3 weeks later, me, a little more hairier, having ridden those two skateboards about 600 miles from Capitol to Capitol. Now, I say that's the same two people in each picture, but really it's not. Because these two people are terrified. And that's no exaggeration. We literally sat around those steps, umming and ahhing and rechecking equipment and repacking packs until my wife, who drove us down to DC, finally said, "Are you doing this thing or not?" So, well, I guess so. So we stepped on the boards and we started skating, and 3 weeks later we arrived in Ottawa, Canada, about 600 miles later. Now, the purpose of me showing you these two pictures is not to get you guys fired up about joining me on my next skateboard trip. Because I'm assuming there's probably not one person in this room that wants to ride a skateboard 600 miles. And that's really not the purpose of this program. The purpose of this program is to ask this question. What is your 600-mile skateboard trip? Because every one of us has something that we're terrified about, something that intimidates us, something that we look at and say, man, one day I'd like to do that. But we don't do it. We put it off. We make excuses. We can't find the time. There's other stuff in life that gets in the way. And before you know it, the opportunity to do such things passes by us. And what I want to do tonight is really tap into the theme of this organization about finding and exploring your authentic self and finding ways to actually make it happen. Because as you heard me say, I've done a few pretty outrageous things in the last few years. And we're going to look into those tonight, a little bit more detail as we go along. But I want to start with a quote, because when I was talking to Karen about setting this whole thing up, she asked me, what is your favorite quote? So I want to share it again with you here right now. This is actually hanging on the wall in my office. And it's by Howard Thurman, who once said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and go do it." Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. I think too often we make the mistake of going through life thinking our job is to find that little unfulfilled niche in life, right? That's how you become a millionaire. You find out what somebody else is not doing and you do it. And we struggle and we sweat and we semi-succeed and we fail, and we realize that what we're really trying to do is just make money or just be famous or just whatever. But what we're not doing is tapping into our true selves. Really, the most successful people in the world, and ironically, most frequently, the richest and most famous people in the world are not the ones that said, how can I become rich and famous? They're just the ones that followed their true self. They did what they wanted to do. They expressed their uniqueness through their work and the way they lived their life. So what we want to try and see if we can do this evening is talk about my life, first of all. This is my day job. This is me basically abusing the trust that parents place in me. And I got to ask you a question. Does that look like the picture of somebody who's living a life? Yeah. Right? I'm having a ball. I can't believe sometimes this is my job. Okay? I know we've probably got a few people in this room whose kids I may have coached over the years, and perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I can't believe people pay me to do this. I get to go to work every day, no shoes, no socks, and just goof around and have fun all day long. It's a great living. It truly is an opportunity to come fully alive. But even in this job, you can get into a rut sometimes. I've been doing this a long time. I really have. I started coaching way back in 1982. I very distinctly remember my very first day on the job. It was a Saturday morning. I'd literally been off the plane from England 3 days. And I was squatting down, looking into the eyes of half a dozen little kids, 6, 7 years old maybe. And I said, man, this is going to be so much fun. We're going to balance on beams, and we're going to jump on the trampoline, and it's going to be so, come on, let's go. And 6 of the kids went running off the beam. But one of them, a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, looked up at me with her chin open and said, "You sound like Mary Poppins." I set this kid straight. I said, "Sweetheart, I sound like James Bond." No, that might be a mistake. But this is the nature of the job that I have. Now, even though I have this great job which makes me come alive and I thoroughly enjoy it, you do sometimes just get into a rut of doing the same thing no matter how much fun your job is. So you start looking for other outlets. You start looking for other ways to sort of come alive in your life. For me, a few years ago, it was running. I decided to get into what's known as ultra running. That means anything beyond 26.2 miles. If you know a marathon, it's 26.2. Ultras start at 26.2. In fact, if you ask an ultra runner, have you ever run a marathon? They will say, yeah, I run them frequently in the middle of races. Because they have miles on either end as well. Now, I can pinpoint the moment when I realized I had to start doing this sort of thing. I'm sure many of you guys have been through a very similar experience where an event occurs in your life where it's kind of like your life happened up until that event and your life happened after that event. And that pivotal moment just changed everything. And usually, hopefully, we hope it's a good event. You win the lottery, you get married, something like that. But more frequently, it's a negative event. Something bad happens in your life. And you have to kind of reevaluate the decisions you've been making up to that point and reflect on how much time you have left to do these dreams that you've been putting on the back burner. And that happened for me big time about 3 days after my 49th birthday. When I was bringing the mail in, and as I was going through the mail, I noticed a letter. It was a letter I knew was coming, and it was a letter I'd been putting off for a long time, and I couldn't avoid it anymore. I took this letter out and tore it open and pulled out the contents, and inside was my invitation to join AARP. Right there in black and white. Me? I'm 49 years old, but that's what they do. Right after your 49th birthday, out goes your invitation to AARP. And I got to admit, I looked at this thing and I thought to myself, me? Association of Retired People? Really? That's how much time I've got left? And it did. It put a panic in me. And that's when I decided to sign up for this race. This is the JFK 50. This is the oldest and longest 50-mile race in the country. They run it down in Maryland. It's been going since the 1960s. And this thing starts at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, to give you an idea of the kind of gnarly people that sign up for these sorts of races, you see all these guys in the front row, no long pants on, all wearing shorts? There's a couple of guys there with no sleeves on. I've got a feeling this guy here doesn't even have a shirt on. This is November, 17 degrees. So these guys figure they're going to warm up as they start running, so they don't need to worry about, And I'm in that group somewhere, way at the back, and that was my first true ultra-marathon run. I finished that 50-mile run in 10.5 hours. So you're out there for quite a long time, but by that point I had the bug. What else can I do? And so I started looking for other things to do. This was a 24-hour race. I wanted to know how far can I run in 24 hours. Turns out the answer is 87 miles. And that was on a 1.5 mile loop. Just running around the loop for 1.5 miles, just to see how far you can go in 24 hours. But it goes on, as you heard in the introduction. My son and I got the idea, hey, if we drove out to Pittsburgh, got my wife to drive us out to Pittsburgh, loaded up his bicycle with camping equipment, and then the two of us, he rode, he was 14 at the time, he rode, I ran from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia over a course of 10 days. So we averaged a marathon a day, a little bit more than a marathon a day for 10 days and arrived back at the Rocky Steps about 10 days later. Now I really had the bug, okay? And that's not the only weird thing I've done at the Rocky Steps. A couple of years ago, I wanted to raise some money for the food bank in town, Fish. So I thought, okay, I wonder if I could go down to the Rocky Steps, because that's a very spiritual kind of place, the Rocky Steps. I love that place. I wonder if I could run a marathon, 26.2 miles, up and down the steps. So I did. I went down there, and again, that took me about 8.5 hours. My typical marathon takes me about 4. This one took me over twice. I was just running up and down the steps for 8.5 hours, 26.2. One of my favorite races is this one up in New York. This is I finished 100K on this one. That's 62 miles. I'm just running around the streets of New York. You can take in 4 different boroughs. But really, for me, the holy grail was a 100-mile race. I mean, you can't really call yourself an ultra runner until you've nailed a 100-mile distance. So I signed up for this one down in Florida. This is the Florida Keys 100, and the goal is to try and run 100 miles from Key Largo to Key West in one day. And this is the view. It's 100 miles of straight ahead. No left, no right, no up, no down. There's a little break here and there. You go through a few villages now and again, but pretty much that's the view for 100 miles. And you can't do it by yourself. You need a crew. So this was my crew. My brother-in-law and my sister flew in from England, and she was my pacer. In other words, every time I felt like I wanted to quit and I wanted to give up, she would jump out the minivan, run alongside me for a mile, maybe 2 miles, get me back up again, and keep me going. At one point, has anybody here ever driven the Florida Keys? You have? Okay, so you know 7 Mile Bridge?
Twice, yeah.
7 Mile Bridge is a stretch where you cannot get off the bridge. It's just a narrow shoulder for 7 miles. And I fell asleep in the middle of 7 Mile Bridge. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't keep my eyes open. My sister was with me, and she kept propping me up and saying, come on, you got to keep going, you got to keep going. And I said, I've got nothing left. So I laid down in the shoulder and I slept on 7 Mile Bridge for about 10 minutes. Just enough time to sort of get the groggies out of the system, got back up and started running again. So she was helpful. She really got me through it. My kids, they were the food. They just kept feeding me the whole time. My son was the videographer. My wife and my brother-in-law were the drivers. And they all got me down to the Florida Keys to the finish line. Now, that is not the actual moment of me crossing the finish line. That was about 2 minutes later. I said to my wife Donna there, about half a mile from the finish line, get in the van, drive to the finish line, set the camera up, because I want a picture of my face when I cross that finish line. Because this is never going to happen again. Now, I don't mean I'm never going to run another 100 miler, because I have since then. I've done a few since then. But I'd never do it again for the first time. And I wanted that picture to hang on the wall of my office of me crossing the finish line. I've got to know what my face looks like after 100 miles of running. So my kids jumped out, my sister jumped out, and all of us ran the last half mile together. My wife was at the finish line, she took a picture, and this is what my face looks like after 100 miles of running. So, the question is, does anybody else in this room have a sister or a brother like my sister? Right? It's all about Andrea. You run 100 miles through the Florida Keys and she steals the moment. But that's what it's all about. So, like I said, this is how I express my authentic self. This is how I sort of tap into what fires me up and gets me excited and gets me alive. And I don't really expect anybody else in the room to get it. You don't have to get it. What I want you to get, though, is there's something like that that you want to do. I don't know what it is. Maybe you want to start your own business. Maybe you want to live in Hawaii. There's something that intimidates you, scares you, excites you. And what I want to do today is see if I can help you develop a strategy for making it happen. Because believe me, I didn't just stumble into running 100-mile races. I had to think about it. I had to strategize. I had to compromise. I had to train. I had to do a lot of things to make this happen. And what I want to encourage you to do is the same. Not just hope this organically will fall into your lap, because it will not. If there's something out there that fires you up and gets you excited, you've got to make it happen. No one's going to do it for you. So the strategy I came up with, as you heard in my introduction, very simple, starts with C. And that is the curiosity to wonder if. In other words, are you a curious person? Do you go through life getting fascinated by things that come into your life? Now, I want to give you an example of what curiosity means to me. So, you don't have to stand up for this, but I would appreciate if everybody would participate in this next exercise, okay? All you simply got to do is put your hands straight out in front of you like this. That's simple enough, right? Thumbs up, okay? And then roll your wrists over. Everybody still with me? Good. And then crisscross, like that. All right, that's still pretty simple. And then link up your fingers. Now here's the important part. Look at your thumb. Make sure that thumb is facing straight down, because this is what I want everybody in the room to do. Ready? What's the problem? Nobody can do it, right? Let me explain what just happened. I learned that from David Copperfield, the Vegas magician. He was on America's Got Talent, and I was sitting on the couch with my kids watching America's Got Talent several years ago. He came out and he did that, and I was like, what did he just do there? Now, I'm the kind of person, like I said, I'm very curious. So I can't just watch something fascinating and say, well, that was interesting, let's move on with my life. I grabbed the remote, hit the pause button, all my kids started whining, we were watching that show, and I explained to them, hey, he who pays the Verizon bill controls the remote. And I went over to Google and I Googled David Copperfield hand twist. And within 2 minutes, I knew the trick. It's a magic trick, okay? I tricked you. You weren't paying attention and I tricked you, okay? So, the thing is this, are you curious about what we just did there?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to know how it happens?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Then go to Google. You didn't seriously think I was going to show you, did you? I'm not gonna. If you're seriously curious about knowing how that happened, you will, not now, put your phones away. Go home tonight and you will Google David Copperfield hand twist trick, and you'll learn how to do it. And when you learn how to do it, you will be so mad and frustrated. The option is you can go to my website too, and the answer is on my website as well. So if you go on the video page of my website, there's an explanation right there too. So that was the first step. You've got to be curious in life. You've got to find what fascinates you. In fact, one of the first things I did when I started getting excited about finding ways to come alive was I did what I call a CI. And for me, that is a curiosity inventory. In other words, I just made a big old list on a legal pad of all the things that kind of interest me. Longboarding, skateboarding was on that list, playing a guitar, all the things that I couldn't do that I would maybe like to be able to do someday. And I came to a list of about 70, and I thought, man, if I'm going all the way to 70, let's put a little bit more effort in and get it to 99. Now, why not 100? Because everybody makes a list of a top 100. I went to 99. And again, that's on my website too. You can see my list. I'm about halfway through my list of things on my website. There's things on there like see the Taj Mahal, scuba dive the Great Barrier Reef, hike in the Himalayan mountains, ride a bicycle 5,000 miles around Europe, learn how to wheel a bicycle.
Yes.
And these are things I've done. They're checked off the list at this point. But there's still a bunch of stuff on that list I haven't done yet. Because it starts with curiosity. That is the seed that will grow into an oak tree. You've got to be able to take the next step too. And that is have the audacity to ask, why not me? Because that's the hurdle a lot of us bump into. We're curious about all these opportunities and challenges in life, but we say, but not me. That's what other people do. Talented people, fortunate people, people with more time, people with better resources than me. They do things like that, but I don't. I'm telling you, you got to have the audacity to say, yeah, me. I'm going to do it. I'll find a way. I'll make it happen. You get some of the people I've met in ultra marathons that do not have the time to train for ultra marathons, but they somehow find a way to do it. For instance, I have kids, and it's hard for me to train. And one day, my kid had a soccer game up in Bethlehem, and the game was at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I had to do a 6-hour run that day. Now, what are you going to do when you've got a 6-hour run and your kid's got a soccer game at 2 o'clock? Well, at 10 o'clock. What you do is you get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you run to Bethlehem to watch her game. And that's about a 30-mile run if you zigzag it enough. And then you can stand there and get both things done. So yeah, there are ways to make it happen. Not saying it's going to be easy, but you've got to have the audacity to think you can make it happen. Now, that means developing belief. Now, Henry Ford, my favorite Henry Ford quote, if you believe you can, or if you believe you can't, you're right. That's worth writing down. If you're out there taking notes, write that one down. Henry Ford, I'll say it again. Henry Ford said that if you believe you can or if you believe you can't, you are right. And what he was basically saying is that if you believe you can't do something, you will find every excuse in the world to justify your belief, and you'll never do it. But if you say you can, that opens up the pathway to maybe making it happen. Now, I learned this lesson myself when I was about 20 years old, about the age my son is right now. I was driving a van up and down the south coast of England. I had a little part-time job, my first real job. I was real excited. And I worked for a company that made industrial quality nuts and bolts and washers and springs and all this kind of stuff for machinery. And it was my job to drive up and down the coast delivering this stuff. Once a week, I had to go to a psychiatric hospital because in the back they had a workshop where a lot of the patients put spring washers on sticky cardboard, and then I would take them to factories, and the factories would use them on the production line. Well, the very first week I went there, I walked into the workshop, and George, one of the patients, offered to help me carry the boxes out. So I said, "Hey, George, you take that one, I'll take this one." And we walked out towards the parking lot. We got to the door. I kicked open the door and started to walk out to the lot. But George put his box on the ground. And I said, "George, my van's just over there. Can you help me carry it the rest of the way?" And George said, "I can't go in the parking lot." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because there's tigers in the parking lot." I said, "Oh, George, this is Southern England, dude. You're fine. There's no tigers. And he was adamant. No, there were tigers in the parking lot. He was not going to step in that parking lot. So, "Okay, George, no problem." He went back to the room, and I picked up the box and I carried him myself. Now, the very next week, I went back again, and I brought this up to one of the nurses. I says, "Boy, oh, George, he really acts strange when he gets out to the parking lot, right?" And the nurse very quickly put me straight and said, "No, there is nothing wrong with the way George acts. There is everything wrong with the way he thinks." You see, George was acting perfectly rational for someone who believes there are tigers in the parking lot. If you thought this town was infested with tigers, you wouldn't walk out that door, and nobody would blame you. The problem was not George's actions. The problem was George's thinking. The problem was George's belief system. He believed there were tigers. He acted as he should. And a lot of us make that same mistake in life, don't we? So how do you change your beliefs? You have to have the courage to open yourself up to new information. You have to read the kind of books you wouldn't normally read. You have to hang around the kind of people that threaten you and intimidate you. You have to be willing to read the articles that maybe disagree with some of the things you hold true. And if you don't do that, well, then you will hold steady to the beliefs you have and you will never change. But if you want to change, if you want to grow, if you want to experience new things, you've got to be willing to take that risky step of opening yourself up to information that is, quite frankly, threatening and scary. But that's how beliefs change. So, audacity comes down to developing the belief that you can actually do these things and that you deserve to do these things. Now, if you can accomplish that, maybe then you can move on to step number 3, and that is to develop the tenacity to see it through. And what do I mean by that? Again, I've got to go back to kids again. I've been coaching forever. And I used to be that kind of coach that if a kid came up to me and said, "I can't do a back handspring on beam," I would say, as many of your coaches did too, there's no such word as can't. Right? You've heard coaches say this. I used to be that kind of a coach. But I stopped about 10 years ago when one of my little guys came up to me, tugged on my shirt, and said, Mr. Gibson, I went home last night and I looked it up in the dictionary, and you're wrong, there is such a word as can't." I had to admit he was right. There is such a word as can't. So I realized I was going to have to get a little more creative in the way I used the word can't. So from that point on, whenever a kid would come up to me and say, "I can't do a back handspring on beam," I would say to them, "Complete that sentence." Which meant they now had to say, "I can't do a back handspring on beam yet." Because when I make them add that one small word to the end of the sentence, we completely change the meaning of the sentence. "I can't" means I can't, I give up, it's too hard, I quit, it's too difficult, I'm at the end of the road, and we are done. But if you say "I can't yet," now what you're saying is, "Man, there's this amazing opportunity out there, and I can't do it yet. So I gotta hustle, I gotta get to work, I gotta look at YouTube videos, I gotta read some articles, I gotta call some people up and take them to coffee. I gotta do things that I've never done before. There is so much work for me to do to accomplish that thing I can't do yet." Same opportunity, completely different attitude. One person has the tenacity to say, all these obstacles in front of me are merely stepping stones to get me where I want to go. The other person says, these obstacles are not obstacles at all. They are barriers. They are there to stop me and prevent me from getting the thing I want, so I quit and I give up. That's the difference between an "I can't" and an "I can't yet" attitude. Now, with my kids, when I coach, I'm hard on that. That's what you got to get, kids. You've got to have that "I can't yet" attitude. Now, something that helps, I think, is what I call the circle of awesomeness. Now, this is a little tool, frankly, I created for myself. I was pondering around with thoughts one day, and I decided I needed a circle of awesomeness to get me out of a rut. So if you guys have ever been in a rut and you don't know how to break out of it, or if you've ever been in a situation where you're just overwhelmed by the chaos of a challenge you've taken on, maybe this tool will help you a little. The circle of awesomeness starts up here. This is where you are comfortable being comfortable, and life is boring and dull and predictable and safe. Right? And most of us live our entire lives in the boring section of life. Doing things that don't challenge us, not stepping out of our comfort zone, not trying new things. Life is not very challenging, but at least it's safe. And a lot of us live there our entire lives. And I did for a long time too, until I got itchy. Which means you're into stage number 2. This is when you become uncomfortable being comfortable. When that ARC letter showed up at my door, I got itchy, right? And how does that happen? You go to a school reunion and you see someone who's very successful. You see a nice car drive down the road and say to yourself, I'd like to drive that car one day. Or maybe somebody comes back from an amazing vacation and you say to yourself, I want to go to Hawaii one day too. In other words, you suddenly become uncomfortable with the things that you have started to enjoy and be very comfortable with. If that happens, then maybe you're ready for what I call sweet chaos. And that is the stage of being uncomfortable, being uncomfortable. This is where you have made the decision to go for it, right? You've decided to switch jobs. You've decided to move to another state. You've decided to start a family and have a baby, right? Your life is in total chaos. Why? Because you are in a situation that is very unfamiliar. You really don't have the skill set to handle this thing you've taken on. So what do you have to do? You have to just slug it out and deal with it and learn and struggle, and a lot of people can't handle that. That's why I also call this the QZ. In other words, this is the quitting zone. This is where people give up on their dreams because they say, didn't know it was going to be this hard. So they quit and they give up. And what a shame, because they are right on the edge of making amazing things happen in their life. If they can just have the tenacity to hang in there through the sweet chaos, the QZ, maybe they can make it to stage number 4. There's still chaos. Things are still going wrong. There's still setbacks and frustrations and disappointments. You still have critics telling you that you're wasting your time. But you can deal with it. You can handle it. You've hung in there long enough to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you know that if you can hang in there long enough, then maybe you can have a success at the end of it. This is the circle of awesomeness. And why is it a circle? Because after a while, you do get good at this stuff, and life becomes boring. And you're right back where you started, and you're out there looking for the next thing on that list that's going to fire you up and get you excited and move on to the next challenge. So basically, the point I wanted to try and get across tonight is very simply this. It wasn't to get you guys fired up about doing 600-mile skateboard trips. It wasn't to convince anybody here that they should run the length of the Florida Keys. That is my expression of living a life. That's my expression of being my authentic self. What I want to do tonight is try and get you guys fired up about the thing that's been in the back of your mind, that you've been maybe putting up, that maybe intimidates you. And one little tip, don't compare yourself to anyone else. It's the biggest mistake we make. We look around and we say, I don't have her talent, I don't have her ability, I don't have her resources, I don't have her good looks, I don't have her this or that or whatever. And so we justify it because we're just not as good as somebody else. Well, learn the lesson of the most important gymnast that I ever had on my team, way back when I first started coaching. This was a kid that was not even on the team. And she wasn't even that good, if I was to be honest. She was a kid that came in once a week on a Wednesday night for 1 hour. And when she was in the gym, everybody worked harder. The kids worked harder, the coaching staff worked harder, everybody was more focused, everybody had more energy, everybody just whined and complained less and got more work done on a Wednesday night for 1 hour than any other night during the week. And I'm convinced it was all because of this kid who wasn't that good. Really wasn't. But I think the reason that she was such an influence on everybody around her was probably because she was blind. 100% blind, could not see a thing, and the only way that she could get over a vault was to stand at the end of the vault runway holding her mum's hand. And mother and daughter would run together down the vault runway. Right before the board, Mum would let go of her girl's hand, and this kid would jump in the air, leap onto a board she couldn't see, reach towards a horse, straddle over it, land on the other side. And Mum would run around and give her a big hug. And how much whining was there in the rest of the gym? There's a blind kid there jumping over a vault and horse you can't even see. The energy was just amazing that night. Why? Because this girl was the best and she was inspiring everybody else to be the best? No, she wasn't the best. She was her best. She knew what her uniqueness was. She knew what her authentic self was. And she didn't compare herself to anyone. She just showed up on a Wednesday night, convinced it was her job in life to go out and do the very best with what's been given to her. So my final encouragement to you guys is simply this. The next time you catch yourself saying, I can't, I want you to complete the sentence, and I want you to say one more word at the end of that sentence. Everybody right now, tell me what that word is.
Yes.
Yes.
See, that's correct. That's good. But here's the thing. I'm a gymnastics coach, right? I've already established that. And if your answer was your routine at a meet, even though it was the correct answer, I'd give that about 2.6. So what I'm going to do as your coach is I'm going to expect more from you. I'm going to raise the standard in this room, and I'm going to ask you guys to score more than 2.6, and I'm going to ask that question one more time and see if I can get an answer with a little more enthusiasm, a little bit more energy, a little bit more like you really mean it, okay? So the question was, the next time you catch yourself saying, I can't, you're going to complete that sentence with one word, and that word is...
Yes.
This is exciting. We're at 6.2. You didn't think we were really done, did you? No, we're not done, because I am not going to leave this room until I get a 10.0 from everybody in this room. Which means that I need the absolute maximum effort from everybody in this room, which requires standing up. Everybody on your feet. So I'm going to ask the question one more time, and this time, wait for the knees to stop creaking.
Yes.
I'm there. I'm an art member. I know. Okay. So I'm going to ask the question one more time, and this time I'm looking for a 10.0. I literally want these pictures to shake off the wall. I want the light pictures to rattle. I want the people over at the pizza shop to drop their stromboli and wonder what's going on. Ready? This is your chance to show me a 10.0. Everybody breathe in. And the next time you catch yourself saying, I can't, you are going to complete that sentence with one word, and that word is...
Yes!
That is a 10.0.